right. Hello, HumanX. Thank you for being here for our exciting chat about the future of and the present of developing software for AI. I've got some amazing guests that are going to share some really interesting and also diverse perspectives. So we're just going to dive right into it and talk about the fact that this whole ecosystem has changed so dramatically even in just the past 90 days in terms of what it looks like to develop software, to deploy AI, to use AI, to build AI. And so would love your all's perspective of what does that look like inside of your companies. You all are producing products and delivering products and using these tools to build them. So if you all could talk a little bit about how it's changed even in just since December, because I hear again and again from companies about the ways that today's coding agents have changed the way that we're building products. Jessica, maybe you could start.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting as a CEO and as a non-technical CEO, a lot of times I've met with, well, AI can just do that, or just AI it, and it's just so easy, right? And I think that the reality of kind of where AI is today on all layers of the 5-layer cake, right?
Yeah.
Is we have some work to do to really do that at scale. So I think that it's super exciting. And I think that it's no secret that people are really, diving into AI. But if you read some of the literature, not many of those projects are getting off the ground. And I think that it's interesting to think about why that is. And of course, it's not one answer. It depends on the use case. But from my perspective, I don't think that we right now are set up to be successful in AI, given that the foundation of how people architect is principled from decades ago, right? So my company specifically really thinks about what foundation do you need for AI to flourish? And that means responsible and explainable AI. And I think the biggest thing right now that we're seeing is there's this lack of trust in, well, what is AI doing? It's almost like this black box, and then it magically appears. So I think we're all kind of grappling with that, quite honestly, internally even, and then with your customer base as well.
Very good. Howie, how about you? You all are one of the biggest software companies in the world.
Yeah.
For consumers.
For consumers,
So Gen Digital owns the brand like Norton, Avast, a number of consumer software, and we actually have about 5,000 people, 1,500 developers. Just to give you the context, the reason context is important is just like Jessica said, right? In order for AI to be effective, useful, it has to change something more fundamental. It's not just adopting the tool, then boom, it happens. I'll say a few things. One thing, Jason, you said earlier, since last, 90 days or since December, that's truly the case.
Yeah.
Because we have been talking about AI, right? I saw, Microsoft Copilot AI for ages, right? Probably 6 years or however many years. In AI world, like 6 years is forever years ago. And we have been talking about, auto completion, this and that, right? But I think literally from December, maybe you could even argue since February, the new update of the model. Wow, even Linus Torvalds, the Linux creator of the Linux said, AI can write better code than him. So if AI can write better code than him, I don't know how many people on the planet can claim the other way around, right? So literally last 90 days, in the last 100 days, changed a lot. I would say the following. We all know this is happening for last, year or two. But I think at this point, I finally can say a year from now, or by the end of the year, if software engineers still doing the software engineer they used to do in the last 5 years, 10 years, in my case, I started writing program more than 30 years ago, it's wrong. For 99.9% of people, it's just wrong. You should look at a different abstraction level. You should look at things differently. Jessica mentioned the black box. As a software engineer, I don't feel comfortable with black box, right? Hey, I give prompt, give me the code. I still feel like I need to understand the line by line. Otherwise, how do I maintain it, right? But guess what? This thing called OpenClaw happened literally last 90 days or 100 days. It really changed my view. It even changed my view. When I first read OpenClaw, just looking at the GitHub, right? It's just vibe coding stuff. It was in January. I know it was, I looked into it because it was hot, right? It was hot on Reddit. It was people talk about it. Jensen Huang had not paid attention to it yet, maybe. But in the technical community, it's a big deal. But after 15 minutes, I wrote it off. I wrote it off because it's vibe coding stuff. I mean, come on. I mean, why should I pay so serious attention to it, right? And then all of you know the rest of the story, right? Jensen said that this is the most important software in human history. And I actually have been reflecting on this in the last 2 months a lot. Why did I write it off in January like this? I myself deploy OpenClaw at home. I use OpenClaw at work. We develop products based on it. And then Jensen Huang said, this is the biggest software. I think software development paradigm is changed now. Before it was like gathering the requirements, right? The design, writing code, the testing, and then sort of some loop, right? I mean, what Peter did is not any of that, right? He has a requirement. Okay, I went out to lunch. I still wanted to check my, Claude Code is still doing work for me. Let's do something. That's all he did. And then boom, the vibe coding, whatever you want to call it, it happened. Is that a software engineering practice? In January, I thought that's crazy. But in April 2026, I started believing this is the new paradigm for software engineering. I can get you more into it, but just pause here. I can talk about this for 1 hour. You can see I'm very passionate about it.
I love it, Howie. So let's talk a little bit about, there's all these capabilities that have been unlocked now, right? Like being able to chat to your agent and tell it, give it instructions, to be able to use the agents that you have from Codex, from Claude Code, from others as well. And yet it's also creating new sets of problems as well.
Yeah.
What are the challenges that this is creating, and what does that look like, and kind of how worried are you at your companies about some of the challenges that AI agents, especially kind of coding agents, are bringing to the fore?
As I told you, in the backstage, there's only one challenge, nothing else. Token. It's too expensive.
Cost. Yeah.
No, kidding aside, I'll let Jessica comment on it, and then I can sort of give you my additional point of view.
Like I said before, I think that it opens up a lot of problems, not only from a business perspective. I also think societally, there's some inequity that may happen when you think about AI and the exposure there. But putting that aside, I think from a business lens, as I said, the data and the segmentation and the sprawl of data, I think it's problematic. And being able to make sense of that data, especially the more autonomous AI becomes, it needs to really understand, and we use the word context a lot, right? But like that nuance and that context. Can agents have that judgment and that empathy, right? That we as humans do. So to me, it's, yes, AI can do a lot, and it's fantastic at a lot, but there's use cases that's really good at, and some use cases that it's not quite there. So I think to your question of like, what is the problem? One, I think that, as I said earlier, there's a foundational problem of you can't build a skyscraper on a single story home foundation, right? So getting that right first, almost slow down the speed up, if you will, and ensuring that you have an architecture that understands not just what's happening in the moment right now, which is most CRUD infrastructure, but really understanding the lineage of the why, what, who, when, where, of what's going on in your systems. That way, as autonomous AI trains on it, it's not training off of a single snapshot. It's training off of a rich data story in which it can make better decisions. And I do believe that enterprises, their competitive advantage, because it's so accessible, like the barrier of entry is so low for AI these days, right? It's going to be how good is your data and how well does the story that data tells that then feeds into your AI.
Very good. What do you think, Howie? Besides the token costs, what else?
It's still the token cost. But I think what Jessica mentioned is one thing that's very important. In order for us to unlock the value of AI or unlock the value from the enterprise or anywhere, data is really the key, right?
Yeah.
The way I think about it is, what's the biggest revolution in the enterprise? It's really about marrying the AI technology with the data and then uncover, and then we sort of unlock a lot of value. The way I think about the data is the following. You think about the PC revolution. We went from paper stuff to Excel, right? It all went there. And then we went to the SaaS revolution, or maybe evolution. Basically, all the data, you sort of unlock a table or kind of some pivots, and then that becomes a SaaS company, right? Each table is a SaaS company, something like that, right? And I think this is all good, but that's like too rigid, too static. The software company has to tell you what dashboard you have, what functionality you have. What AI does is really unlock the value back to like you have control. You have the data, you can just use AI. This time you don't have to learn the Excel kung fu, and then you can get everything you want, right? And then you can join gazillion data together, which was not scalable, which was not possible before. So I think with AI, we can do a lot more things. Now back to your question about, what are the bottlenecks? Token cost is one thing, data is another thing. I think another thing is really the mindset or the org, right?
Okay.
We sort of, as I mentioned earlier, right? Software engineer has a paradigm. But that paradigm needs to be pretty much disrupted completely. Even by now, of course, only 10% of the people, maybe at most, disrupted that paradigm. But by the end of the year, by the end of another 18 months, that paradigm has to be shattered completely. But not having that paradigm shattered, to me, is the bottleneck, people's mindset.
And that's the hardest thing to change, right?
Human is always the
right.
hardest. We think, there's hallucination on the AI side. We didn't realize human hallucinated more.
Right. Now, how big is your engineering team?
1,500.
So with such a big company, what are you seeing in such a big company in terms of that culture change?
Look, it's hard.
Yeah.
Some people are curious enough. You don't even need to tell them. They already start doing that, right? You don't even need to give them the work version of the cursor or whatnot. They already start experimenting at home. But some people just, I want to say slow or stubborn, but it's just naturally there are early adopters, there is a relatively late adopters. The good news is I see, at least within my visibility, a lot of the relatively late adopters started using AI too, right? They started, because, think about it. If I have a team of 8 people, used to be there's one person always, talking about AI all day long, but he's too excited. But now I'm the only one of the 2 people who are not excited about it. So it's sort of getting to that state.
Yeah.
How about same question for you, Jessica, inside your company? Like, how big is the engineering team? What's the impact, that's having for the team?
I think it's a little different. I mean, you have 2 ends of the spectrum. You're a very large company. We're a 50-person company, right? Half of which are developers. So as you said, I do think that it's very contagious. As one person gets really excited, it kind of catches on really quickly. I also think it starts with leadership. So our CTO, he's also the founder, Allard, he's very AI forward. So I think by being that visionary for the team of what AI unlocks, that really helps. And it quite honestly, it hasn't really been a struggle. But again, it's a 50-person company versus a thousands and thousands of person company.
Very good. All right, I want to ask you both a question about open source, its role in AI, because you both have some connections to this. Jessica, your company, Axoniq, has some open source underpinnings. Howie, we're building on the browser. And I'd love to talk more about if we can, about Neo. That's built on some of the Chromium foundations, but it only does so much. But then you have the larger picture of models, where a lot of companies now are building some of what they're doing on these open source models, because it sort of takes you half of the way there. So when you think about the picture of what the picture looks like for open source in the AI ecosystem and what it looks like for you all, What does that look like? What comes to mind? Maybe how you start this one.
Yeah, since you mentioned the Neo, so we have a AI browser called the Norton Neo, basically based on this open source Chromium, right? Pretty much everyone's browser, not just Chrome, but also Microsoft Edge, and then most of the browsers is based on the Chromium. So from that point of view, open source is tremendously useful for us. But it's more than that. We build an AI browser. We believe that in the AI age, it's not just a human looking at a browser. Your agent should helping you, and then your productivity should be 10 times more because of AI browser. So check out Norton Neo. However, open actually makes more difference to me because I use OpenAI and the Anthropic APIs here and there depending on the features, right? But I also have a need to actually do local model only, right? Because some users say, well, for one reason that they don't just trust the external model. I mean, there are always and then we want to provide them the local model possibility so that hey, the local model within my Norton Neo browser would give you the security, the privacy. Guess what? There is still a significant portion of the population do not trust AI, and especially the external calls here and there, right? So when you have the more curated model, you are sort of the our own curated model inside a browser, they just have more trust. So that's kind of our primary angle, the most secure private AI browser on the planet. And then there are more and more people adopting it.
Can I ask one quick follow-up question on that? Howie, with Norton Neo, will you be the only browser that will let you run local models? Are there other browsers that will let you run local models too?
Look, that's a very good question. I haven't paid it to competitors enough yet. I can't comment on it.
All right, fair enough. Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, I think that open source definitely has a huge play in AI. I do think, though, that there's friction there, to your point of trust and security, what have you. We always say open source contributors don't necessarily pick up the phone at 2 a.m. when you have a vulnerability, right? So there's aspects that at scale we need to think about of how does open source technology weave in and how is that supported. But I think in general, open source is just so beautiful in terms of the innovation that it brings and just the collaboration of all the minds and giving back and contributing. And I think that it will be a large part. But I do think, like it is today, I think that we are going to have to figure out the sustainability of open source as well as the security, the privacy, et cetera.
Okay, very good. How about, we talked a little bit about the opportunity. We talked about some of the challenges. What do we need to do going forward to address, some of the challenges in AI? How can we make things better? What needs to be done? What are the things that are on your mind, along with lowering token costs, I'm sure, but we can talk about how you do that. Yeah, what are your companies thinking, like, what are your own AI costs? What are some of your own AI challenges? How can you address those? Maybe just sort of rest of 2026, what's in view? You want to start, Jessica?
I'll just go back to slow down to speed up, of take a step back, think about it systematically, not just, I want to deploy this AI thing of well, how is that going to affect the whole ecosystem, even internally?
Okay.
Nonetheless, when you're thinking about it from a product perspective and making sure you have all of those fundamental pieces in place so it can scale, it won't break as we're continuing to amp up. So for me, I tell my teams is, yes, we're all in AI, but let's do it very intentionally. And let's not do it just fast, just to do it. Let's make sure we're solving the right problems and it's sustainable and responsible.
Very good.
Yeah, let me just pick the open source, OpenClaw as an example, right? Hopefully, everyone in this room heard about it, played around with it, but there are still some fundamental issues with OpenClaw. One is the safety, security, right? Even Peter himself, feel like this is one of the biggest challenge. He's moving OpenClaw very fast to address this, but this is one of the biggest things. Actually, my team is actually helping OpenClaw We actually collaborated together, fixing a lot of issues together. So that's one issue. So security, still a big deal. And then that's our company's mission, layering the trust layer on the AI economy. But the second thing, I'm not going to repeat, but still the cost, but it's more than just the cost, effectively, right? Because, you can, I actually ran OpenClaw for 3 hours and then burned, I don't know, I want to tell you, burned a gazillion tokens.
Token maxing.
And there was a lot of room to optimize it. So it's not just cost, right? How do you optimize it? I think we're early inning to get this going. And then last but not least, I think AI still needs to be easy to use. If you think about why a ChatGPT was the biggest moment in the AI history, probably, right? Or arguably, because it's ease of use, right? Anyone can log on, ask questions, boom, right? Q&A. The value of the current generation or the new generation of AI is really about taking actions, writing code. But guess what, right? Writing code, the barrier is much lower, but still not like everyone on this floor would do it, right?
It's great for POCs, right? But then as you get deeper.
Yeah. I actually had a talk to a friend, just like you are CEO of a startup, right? She told me that I actually walked through my friend, like, hey, this is how to use Claude Code to solve a problem you really want to solve. And then her friend still didn't want to follow through after she walked her, step by step how to do it. That shows you that we are still not there in terms of the usability. So usability, the cost, and then the trust is very important.
I think the trust factor is maybe the most important. And there's a lot of different aspects to that trust.
That's why we had the Agent Trust Hub technology we released for OpenClaw exactly to solve that problem.
Yep.
Excellent. Howie, Jessica, thank you so much for your time, for your insights. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a great rest of the HumanX.